January 26, 1945. Near Holtzwihr, France, 2 p.m. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy, 19 years old, 5 foot 5 inches tall, 112 pounds soaking wet, watched through binoculars as 250. German soldiers and 6 Panzer tanks emerged from the frozen woods and advanced toward his position. He had 40 men. They had 6 tanks and 250 infantry. The math was simple. His company would be overrun in minutes. Then one of his tank destroyers took a direct hit and burst into flames. Black smoke poured from the engine. Ammunition inside began cooking off. Everyone ran from the burning vehicle. Everyone except Audie Murphy. He climbed on top of that burning tank destroyer, grabbed the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the turret, and for the next hour, standing fully exposed on a vehicle that could explode at any second, he held off an entire German company by himself. This is the story of 1 hour that turned a Texas farm boy into the most decorated American soldier of World War II. 1 hour that stopped a German attack. 1 hour that earned him the Medal of Honor. Every second is documented. Every detail verified. This is what happened when one man refused to run. Opening the phone call. The phone rang at 1:47 p.m. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy picked up the field telephone in the farmhouse he was using as a command post outside Holtzwihr, France. The voice on the other end belonged to Captain Johnson, battalion commander. "Murphy, we've got movement in the woods to your front. Looks like armor. Maybe infantry. Keep your eyes open," Murphy said. "Yes, sir," and hung up. He walked to the window and raised his binoculars. The farmhouse sat on the edge of a flat, snow-covered field, maybe 400 yards of open ground stretching to the tree line. Beyond those trees was Germany. Beyond those trees were thousands of German soldiers who wanted to push the Americans back across France. Murphy was 19 years old. He'd been in combat for 2 years. He'd fought in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France. He'd seen more death than most men see in a lifetime. He'd lost count of how many friends he'd buried. He was 5 foot 5. Weighed 112 pounds. Baby-faced, looked like he should be in high school, not commanding a company of infantry. But when Audie Murphy looked through those binoculars and saw what was coming out of the woods, his hands didn't shake. His breath didn't catch. He just lowered the binoculars, picked up the phone, and called Captain Johnson back. "Sir, we've got 6 tanks and at least 2 companies of infantry advancing on our position. Estimate 250 Germans, maybe more. They'll be in range in 10 minutes. There was silence on the other end. Then, can you hold?" Murphy looked out the window again. 6 German Panzer tanks and 250 infantry advancing across open ground toward 40 American soldiers in shallow foxholes. He said, "We'll find out." He hung up, grabbed his rifle, walked outside into the snow. It was January 26, 1945, 2 p.m. The temperature was 12 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground was frozen solid. The sky was grey. Snow fell in lazy flakes. And Audie Murphy was about to fight the battle that would define his life. He walked along the line of foxholes where his men were dug in. Most of them were replacements, new guys who'd only been with the company a few weeks. They'd never seen real combat. Now they were about to face German tanks and elite infantry. One kid, couldn't have been more than 18, was shaking so hard he could barely hold his rifle. Murphy knelt beside his foxhole and said quietly, "You're going to be fine. Just aim, center mass, and squeeze. Don't waste bullets." The kid nodded, but didn't look convinced. Murphy kept walking. He checked ammunition. Checked fields of fire. Positioned his 2 M10 tank destroyers, lightly armored tracked vehicles with 3-inch guns, meant to kill German tanks. They were his only hope against the Panzers. He stopped and looked across the field. The Germans were 300 yards away now, close enough to see individual soldiers, close enough to see the massive gun barrels on those Panzer tanks. His radio operator ran up. "Sir, battalion wants to know if we need artillery support." Murphy shook his head. "Tell them no. Artillery will just give away our position. We stay quiet until they're close. Then we hit them all at once." The radio operator hesitated. "Sir, "There's a lot of them." Murphy looked at him and said, "There's always a lot of them. Now get back to your radio." The kid ran off. Murphy turned back to the field and whispered to himself, "Come on, keep coming. Get close." The Germans were 200 yards away. Murphy raised his rifle and waited. 40 American soldiers in foxholes across a frozen field, watching 250 Germans and 6 tanks advance toward them in broad daylight. Someone down the line whispered loud enough for Murphy to hear, "We're going to die." Murphy didn't respond. He just kept watching through his rifle scope, counting down the yards. 150, 125, 100. At 75 yards, close enough to see faces, close enough to hear boots crunching in snow, Murphy fired. One shot, one German officer fell, and the entire battlefield exploded. The farm boy, who became a soldier to understand what happened that afternoon in France. You need to understand who Audie Murphy was before he became a soldier. Because the man who stood on that burning tank didn't come from privilege or training or military tradition. He came from poverty so deep it shaped everything he would become. Audie Leon Murphy was born June 20th, 1925 in Kingston, Texas, a nothing town in Hunt County where dirt roads outnumbered paved ones and most families survived on subsistence farming. His father, Emmett Murphy, was a sharecropper who worked land he didn't own, for wages he could barely live on. His mother, Josie Bell, gave birth to 12 children, 9 of whom survived past infancy. Audie was the 7th child. They lived in a two-room shack with no electricity, no running water, dirt floors. The kids slept 3 and 4 to a bed. Meals were whatever they could grow or hunt. New clothes were something other people had. Shoes were worn until they fell apart, then passed down to the next kid. When Audie was 5 years old, his father taught him to shoot, not for sport, for survival. If Audie could shoot a rabbit or a squirrel, the family ate meat that night. If he missed, they ate beans or nothing. Emmett Murphy gave Audie a single-shot .22 rifle and one rule: don't waste bullets. Bullets cost 3 cents each. The family didn't have 3 cents to waste. So Audie learned to shoot with precision most people never achieve. 1 bullet, 1 kill. No second chances. By the time he was 8 years old, he could shoot a running rabbit at 50 yards. By 10, he was putting meat on the table several times a week. He dropped out of school after 5th grade to pick cotton for $1 a day. The family needed money, and Audie was the oldest boy still at home. His education ended at age 11. In 1940, when Audie was 15, his father abandoned the family, just walked away one day and never came back. Josie Murphy was left alone with 9 kids and no income. Audie became the man of the house at 15. He worked every job he could find, picked cotton, worked in a gas station, did odd jobs for neighbors, gave every penny to his mother. In 1941, Josie Murphy died. Audie was 16. His mother, the only person in the world who'd ever shown him unconditional love, was gone. The younger kids were split up and sent to orphanages or relatives. Audie was alone, no family, no home, no education, no prospects. He worked random jobs for the next year, sleeping in barns or cheap boarding houses, sending what little money he had to his siblings. Then, on December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Audie Murphy walked into a Marine Corps recruiting office in Dallas the next day and tried to enlist. The recruiter looked at this 5'5", 110-pound kid who looked like he was 12 years old and laughed him out of the office. Audie tried, the Navy rejected, too small. He tried the paratroopers, rejected, too short. Finally, he lied about his age, said he was 18 when he was 17, forged his sister's signature on the parental consent form, and convinced an army recruiter to let him join the infantry. On June 30, 1942, Audie Murphy became a private in the United States Army. He was 17 years old, weighed 112 pounds, had a 5th-grade education, had never been more than 50 miles from his hometown. In basic training, his drill sergeant thought he was too small and weak to be a combat soldier, recommended he be transferred to cook duty or clerk work. Murphy refused. He said, "I came here to be a soldier. Make me a soldier." Something in his eyes made the sergeant believe him. Murphy stayed in combat infantry training. He learned to fire an M1 Garand rifle. After growing up shooting a single-shot .22, the Garand felt like cheating, 8 rounds in a clip, semi-automatic fire. He qualified as expert marksman on his first try. Same with the pistol, the machine gun, the grenade. His platoon sergeant said later, "Murphy was the best natural shot I ever saw. He didn't aim like normal soldiers, he just raised the rifle and fired, and whatever he pointed at fell down, like he'd been born with that rifle in his hands." In February 1943, Murphy shipped out to North Africa as part of the 3rd Infantry Division. He was 18 years old, had never been on a ship, had never left Texas, had never seen the ocean. He arrived in Morocco, then moved to Tunisia, where American forces were fighting Germans for control of North Africa. Murphy's first combat action came in March 1943, near a town called Kasserine Pass. He was terrified, admits it in his memoir. Says he wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to be anywhere but on that battlefield with bullets snapping past his head. But he didn't run. He stayed. He fired his rifle. He killed his first German soldier, a sniper shooting from a building 200 yards away. Murphy aimed, squeezed the trigger. The sniper fell. Murphy threw up immediately after. Sat behind a wall and vomited into the dirt because he'd just taken a human life and the weight of it crushed him. His sergeant found him and said, "You good?" Murphy wiped his mouth and said, "I'm good." He picked up his rifle and went back to fighting. By the end of the North African campaign in May 1943, Murphy had killed 7 German soldiers. Had earned a reputation as someone you wanted in your foxhole. Didn't panic, didn't waste bullets. Just aimed and fired with cold mechanical efficiency. He shipped to Sicily in July 1943. Fought through towns with names he couldn't pronounce. Took shrapnel in the leg. Refused evacuation. Kept fighting. Moved to mainland Italy in September 1943. Fought up the boot of Italy through some of the worst terrain and weather of the war. Mountains, mud, rain. Germans dug into defensive positions on every ridge. Murphy's company took 60% casualties. Friends died around him almost daily. He stopped learning new guys' names because they'd be dead in a week anyway. He was promoted to corporal in November 1943. Staff sergeant in January 1944. Made 2nd lieutenant in October 1944. At age 19, a battlefield commission, earned by being the last man standing after his platoon took heavy losses. By January 1945, Audie Murphy had been in continuous combat for 20 months. He'd fought in 7 campaigns across 3 countries. He'd killed dozens of enemy soldiers. He'd been wounded twice. He'd received the Distinguished Service Cross, to Silver Stars, and the Legion of Merit. He had malaria that came and went in fever waves. Had chronic nightmares, woke up screaming most nights. Had what they'd later call PTSD, but what, in 1945, they just called exhaustion. He weighed 112 pounds, couldn't grow a beard, looked like a kid playing soldier. But when the Germans came out of those woods on January 26, 1945, Audie Murphy was the most dangerous man on that battlefield. The field outside Holtzwihr, the shooting started at 2:05 p.m. Murphy's first shot dropped a German officer. The Germans immediately went to ground, taking cover behind terrain folds and returning fire. The 6 Panzer tanks kept advancing, their treads crushing through frozen snow. Murphy shouted to his machine gunners, "Wait for infantry. Let the tanks come." The German tactic was simple and effective. Let the tanks advance first to draw American anti-tank fire. Then send infantry forward once the American guns were revealed and targeted. But Murphy had fought Germans for 2 years. He knew their tactics. So he held fire on the tanks and focused on the infantry. His riflemen opened up from their foxholes. 40 M1 Garands firing in coordinated volleys. Germans started falling. The attack wavered. One of the Panzers fired its main gun. The shell screamed overhead and exploded behind the American line. The tank traversed its turret, searching for targets. Murphy picked up his field phone and called for his 2 tank destroyers to engage. The M10s were positioned 100 yards behind the main line, hull down behind a slight rise, so only their turrets were exposed. The lead M10 callsign Able fired first. The 3-inch armor-piercing round hit the lead Panzer on the front glacis plate. The shell bounced off. German armor was too thick. The shot did nothing except reveal the M10's position. 3 Panzers immediately turned their turrets toward Able. Murphy screamed into the phone, "Move, now." The M10 started to reverse. Too late. 3 German tanks fired simultaneously. The first shell missed. The second hit the ground in front, throwing up a geyser of frozen dirt. The third hit Able directly in the turret. The explosion was massive. The M10's ammunition cooked off in a secondary blast. Black smoke poured from the vehicle. The crew bailed out, running through snow toward the American lines. Murphy watched the M10 burn and did the math in his head. He now had 1 tank destroyer against 6 Panzers. The Germans had armor superiority. This fight was already lost, but he'd never retreated in his life. Wasn't about to start now. He called his second M10 callsign Baker and told them to pull back 50 yards and take up a hold-down position near the farmhouse. If they could funnel the German tanks into a narrow kill zone, maybe Baker could take them out one at a time. The Germans were 50 yards away now, close enough to throw grenades. Murphy's riflemen poured fire into them. Germans fell, but more kept coming. 250 infantry, even with heavy casualties, that was enough bodies to overwhelm 40 defenders through sheer weight of numbers. A Panzer fired its machine gun, raking the American foxholes. Murphy saw one of his men take a burst across the chest and go down. Another Panzer lurched forward, crushing through a barbed wire barrier like it was made of string. The tank's treads were 10 feet wide. If it reached the foxholes, it would simply drive over them and crush everyone inside. Murphy grabbed his phone and called, "Battalion, we need artillery." Target coordinates before he could finish. A Panzer round hit Baker, his last tank destroyer, and turned it into a fireball. Now Murphy had no armor, no tank support. Just 40 riflemen in foxholes against 6 tanks and 200 infantry. He dropped the phone and picked up his rifle, aimed at a German soldier 30 yards away, and fired. The German fell. Murphy worked the bolt, chambered another round, found another target. His company was about to be overrun. He could see it happening. Germans advancing from multiple directions. Tanks crushing through defenses. His men starting to pull back from their foxholes. He shouted, "Hold your positions. Do not fall back." But some of his men were already running. Panic was spreading. Once it started, it would ripple through the entire line and the company would break. Murphy saw Able, his destroyed tank destroyer, still burning 50 yards away. Flames poured from the engine compartment. Smoke billowed. Ammunition was cooking off inside, sending small explosions and popping sounds echoing across the field. But the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the turret was intact. Murphy could see it through the smoke, still there, probably still loaded. He looked at that burning vehicle, looked at his men starting to run, looked at the Germans 30 yards away and closing, and he made a decision that defied every survival instinct. He ran toward the burning tank destroyer. His radio operator screamed, "Lieutenant, no, it's going to blow." Murphy didn't stop. He sprinted across 50 yards of open ground while German soldiers shot at him. Bullets kicked up snow around his boots. A Panzer fired, and the shell screamed past his head. He reached the burning M10 and climbed on top. The metal was hot enough to burn through his gloves. Smoke choked his lungs. Flames roared from the engine compartment 6 feet below him. He grabbed the .50 caliber machine gun, yanked back the charging handle, and opened fire. The gun roared. 50 caliber rounds, bullets the size of a man's thumb, fired at 2,900 feet per second, tore into the advancing Germans. Murphy stood fully exposed on top of a burning vehicle that could explode any second and fired. the .50 cal into the German infantry at point-blank range. It was 2:12 p.m. For the next hour, Audie Murphy stood on that burning tank and fought an entire German company by himself. 1 hour, the Germans couldn't believe what they were seeing. One American soldier, standing on a burning vehicle, firing a heavy machine gun from a completely exposed position. No cover, no concealment. Just standing there in the open while bullets snapped past his head and artillery shells exploded around him. They tried to kill him. God knows they tried. German riflemen fired at him from 30 yards. Murphy didn't flinch. Just kept firing the .50 cal, sweeping it back and forth across the advancing infantry. Germans fell in groups. A Panzer fired its main gun at the burning M10. The shell hit the ground next to the vehicle and threw Murphy sideways. He grabbed the machine gun to keep from falling off, steadied himself, and kept firing. Another Panzer fired. The shell hit the M10's hull, directly below where Murphy was standing. The entire vehicle shook. Murphy's legs buckled, but he didn't fall. He braced himself against the turret and kept firing. The Germans threw grenades. Most fell short. One landed on the M10's deck near Murphy's feet. He kicked it off. It exploded in midair, close enough that shrapnel tore through his pants and cut his leg. Blood ran down into his boot. Murphy ignored it, kept firing. The .50 caliber machine gun fired 450 to 550 rounds per minute. Murphy was burning through ammunition so fast the barrel started glowing red-hot. Smoke from the burning vehicle mixed with smoke from the gun. He was shooting through a cloud of his own making, barely able to see targets, but he didn't need to see clearly. The Germans were so close he could hear them shouting in German. He just aimed toward the voices and squeezed the trigger. The .50 cal bullets punched through trees, through stone walls, through anything in their path. His field phone rang. He'd brought it with him and clipped it to his belt before climbing on the tank. He picked it up without stopping firing, phone in one hand, .50 cal in the other. It was the Battalion Fire Direction Center asking if he wanted artillery support. Murphy shouted over the gunfire. Yes, grid coordinates. He rattled off numbers from memory while simultaneously firing the machine gun. Danger, close. Repeat. Danger, close. Danger close meant the artillery would be landing within 600 yards of his own position. Close enough to kill him if the targeting was off even slightly. Murphy didn't care. He needed to stop the German advance, and if that meant calling artillery down on his own head, so be it. 30 seconds later, American 105mm artillery shells started falling on the German infantry. The explosions walked across the field, each one throwing up geysers of frozen earth and shrapnel. Germans scrambled for cover. The advance stalled. Murphy kept firing. The .50 cal was running low on ammunition. He could feel it getting lighter. Maybe 50 rounds left, maybe less. He shouted into the phone, "I need more ammo on this gun." The voice on the other end said, "Sir, you need to get off that vehicle." "It's going to explode," Murphy said. "Then send me the damn ammo before it does." One of his men, Sergeant Kerrigan, a kid from Boston who'd been with Murphy since Italy, saw what Murphy needed and did something almost as crazy as what Murphy was doing. He grabbed 2 boxes of .50 cal ammunition to 100 rounds each, 75 pounds total, and ran across 50 yards of open ground, toward the burning tank destroyer. German bullets cut through the air around him. He didn't stop, reached the M10, threw the ammo boxes up to Murphy, and sprinted back to his foxhole. Murphy reloaded the .50 cal without breaking fire rhythm. 1 box emptied. Load the next. Keep shooting. Keep killing. The Germans tried a new tactic. They sent infantry around Murphy's flanks, trying to get behind him where he couldn't bring the machine gun to bear. Murphy saw them, stopped firing the .50 cal for 3 seconds, drew his M1911 pistol from his hip, shot a German soldier trying to flank left, shot another trying to flank right. Both fell. He holstered the pistol and went back to the machine gun. The Panzers were 20 yards away now, close enough that Murphy could see the drivers inside through the vision slits. One tank turned its turret toward him, the massive gun barrel swinging slowly to aim directly at Murphy. Murphy aimed the .50 cal at the tank's vision slit and fired a 20-round burst. The bullets couldn't penetrate the armor, but they could blind the driver. The Panzer stopped, unable to see. Murphy shifted fire to the infantry, following behind the tank, and cut them down. Another Panzer tried to rush the American lines. Murphy called artillery coordinates and walked 105mm shells right onto the tank's position. The artillery didn't kill the Panzer, but it killed or wounded every German infantry soldier near it. The tank was left unsupported, alone, and vulnerable. Murphy's riflemen hit it with rifle grenades and bazooka fire until the crew bailed out. 1 Panzer down, 5 left. Murphy's legs were shaking. Not from fear, from exhaustion. He'd been standing on that burning vehicle for 40 minutes. The heat from the flames below was so intense his boots were starting to smoke. His hands were burned from the hot gun. His lungs ached from breathing smoke. The .50 cal jammed. Murphy had fired it so fast for so long that the barrel overheated and a round got stuck in the chamber. Without hesitation, Murphy dropped the machine gun, picked up his M1 Garand rifle that he'd slung across his back, and started shooting with that instead. 8-round clips, semi-automatic fire. He fired as fast as he could work the trigger. Empty clip pinged out. Reload. Fire again. A German officer stood up 40 yards away and tried to rally his men for another push. Murphy shot him through the chest. The officer fell. The German advance wavered again. Murphy's rifle ran out of ammo. He reached for another clip. Didn't have one. He'd used them all. So he threw the empty rifle at the closest German soldier. Actually threw his rifle like a spear. Then drew his pistol and emptied the magazine. 7 rounds, 7 dead Germans. He reloaded the pistol, fired again. By now, the M10's ammunition was fully cooked off and the fire had died. Down enough that the .50 cal was usable again. Murphy holstered his pistol, went back to the machine gun, cleared the jam, and resumed firing. It was 3:07 p.m. He'd been standing on that burning tank for 55 minutes. The Germans had had enough. They'd lost over 50 men killed or wounded. They'd lost 1 tank. They'd been hammered by artillery. And that 1 American soldier on the burning vehicle refused to die. German officers started shouting orders. The infantry began pulling back toward the tree line. The remaining 5 Panzers reversed, backing away from the American position. Murphy kept firing until they were out of range. Then he stopped, lowered the machine gun, looked around at the battlefield, bodies everywhere. German soldiers lying in the snow, blood turning the white ground red, craters from artillery, burning vehicles, smoke drifting across the field. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline wearing off. The pain from his leg wound hitting him all at once. He climbed down from the M10 and nearly collapsed when his feet hit the ground. His legs wouldn't hold him. He sat in the snow and just breathed for a minute. Sergeant Kerrigan ran up. "Lieutenant, you hit." Murphy looked down at his leg. Blood soaked through his pants from the grenade shrapnel. He hadn't even noticed until now. He said, "I'm fine. Check the men." Kerrigan helped Murphy stand and half-carried him back to the American lines. Murphy's company was still there, still in their foxholes. They hadn't broken, they'd held. Murphy did a quick head count. 40 men at the start, 36 now, 4 dead, 7 wounded. Could have been a lot worse. The Germans had lost over 50 killed, dozens wounded, 1 tank destroyed, and their entire attack stopped cold. Murphy sat in a foxhole and let a medic bandage his leg. The medic wanted to evacuate him. Murphy refused. "I'm staying with my company." The medic said, "Sir, you need a hospital." That leg, Murphy cut him off. I said, "I'm staying." He stayed. At 5 p.m., Battalion called and told him to pull his company back to secondary defensive positions. The Germans might attack again at night. Murphy gave the orders. His men pulled back in good order. No panic, no chaos. Professional soldiers doing their job. Murphy was the last man to leave the field. He stood there in the falling snow, looking at that burned-out M10 where he'd spent an hour fighting for his life. Then he turned and walked away. It was January 26, 1945, 5:15 p.m. Audie Murphy had just fought the battle that would define him forever. Aftermath. What came next? Murphy refused evacuation to a field hospital. He stayed with his company, got his leg bandaged, and was back on duty the next morning. None of his men said anything about what they'd witnessed. Not because they didn't want to, because they didn't have words for it. What Murphy had done on that burning tank destroyer didn't fit into any framework they understood. It was beyond courage. Beyond heroism, it was something else entirely. One private later said, "I've been in combat for 8 months. I've seen brave men. But what Lieutenant Murphy did wasn't bravery. Bravery is being scared and doing it anyway." Murphy didn't look scared. He looked ... calm. Like standing on a burning tank, getting shot at, was just another Tuesday for him. That's not human. The battle report went up the chain of command. Battalion Commander 2, Regiment 2, Division 2, Corps. Each level read it and thought the same thing. This can't be true. Nobody stands on a burning vehicle for an hour and lives. They investigated, interviewed witnesses, examined the battlefield, counted German bodies, matched artillery records to Murphy's call for fire support. Everything checked out. Audie Murphy had done exactly what the report said. On June 2, 1945, 4 months after the battle and 1 month after Germany surrendered, Audie Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor. The citation read in part, *to DLT. Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry. To DLT, Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to prepared positions in a woods, while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him, to his right, one of our tank destroyers received a direct hit and began to burn. Its crew withdrew to the woods. To DLT, Murphy continued to direct artillery fire, which killed large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry. With the enemy tanks abreast of his position, to DLT, Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and employed its .50 caliber machine gun against the enemy. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides. But his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. The enemy tanks, losing infantry support, began to fall back. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate to DLT Murphy. But he continued to hold his position and wiped out a squad which was trying to creep up unnoticed on his right flank. Germans reached as close as 10 yards, only to be mowed down by his fire. He received a leg wound, but ignored it and continued the single-handed fight until his ammunition was exhausted. He then made his way to his company, refused medical attention, and organized the company in a counterattack which forced the Germans to withdraw. His directing of artillery fire wiped out many of the enemy. He killed or wounded about 52 DL. Murphy's indomitable courage and his refusal to give an inch of ground saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction, and enabled it to hold the woods which had been the enemy's objective. General Alexander Patch pinned the medal on Murphy's chest at a ceremony in France. Murphy stood at attention while photographers took pictures. Later, a reporter asked him, "What were you thinking when you climbed on that tank?" Murphy thought for a moment and said, "I was thinking my men needed me. Were you scared?" "I don't remember being scared. I remember being angry." Angry at what? At the Germans for making me fight them. At the war for not being over yet. At myself for not being able to save more of my men. The reporter pressed, "But weren't you afraid you'd die up there?" Murphy looked at him with those old eyes in that young face and said quietly, "I'd been ready to die since North Africa. If I died on that tank, at least I'd die doing something that mattered." The interview ended. Murphy walked away. He never talked about the battle again unless someone specifically asked. The most decorated soldier by the time Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, Audie Murphy had earned Medal of Honor Distinguished, Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, French Croix de Guerre, twice, Belgian Croix de Guerre. He was the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. 33 awards and medals. He'd killed at least 240 enemy soldiers during the war. Possibly more. Records weren't always accurate in combat. He'd been wounded 3 times. Should have been evacuated each time. Refused each time. He'd earned battlefield promotions from private to second lieutenant in less than 2 years. And he was 20 years old when the war ended. Murphy returned to the United States in June 1945. He was immediately famous, the most decorated soldier. The kid from Texas who'd won the Medal of Honor. Magazines wanted interviews. Movie studios wanted to make films about him. Life magazine put him on the cover with the headline, Most Decorated Soldier. The accompanying article described him as baby-faced and soft-spoken, looking more like a high school student than the most lethal American soldier of the war. Hollywood came calling. Murphy initially turned them down. He said, "I'm not an actor. I'm a soldier." But after several months of civilian life, Murphy realized he was broke. The Army paid him $21 a month as a lieutenant. His Medal of Honor came with a $10 monthly stipend for life. He had no education, no job skills outside killing people, and no prospects. He needed money. Hollywood had money. In 1948, Murphy moved to California and started acting in movies. His first role was playing himself in a film about World War II veterans. The studio was nervous. Murphy had never acted before. Could a real soldier play a soldier?